That right there is the perfect bee yard. It's facing south. It's got good drainage. It's got a perfect north wind break. There's plenty of water right down here in the creek, down in the bottom. And we have good access. I often get asked what to look for when picking a bee yard, and that's it in a nutshell. The problem is, it's hard to get all those things in the same place. We just got lucky here. And we just got through working this yard in Rabun Gap, Georgia. They're in really good shape. This is a particularly good yard. They seem to have been bringing in a lot of pollen. Of course, that's part of the key. So, most of the colonies in this yard look like this one. Lots of bees. A lot of Italian genetics in this yard. Pick up another lid. I know that's a big one, but I think most of them look like that, honestly.
Well, they got some bees.
Yeah, this one's a little smaller, but that's typical of this yard, yeah. Yeah. Well, actually in this yard, even our Caucasian bees are a little bigger than we've been seeing, so there's something good about this yard. Probably just the pollen source. Anyway, back behind the truck there's another pollen source that we see now and then. So this white vine here is clematis. I think some people pronounce it clematis. I'm not sure which is correct. I call it clematis. And this, from what I understand, this is not a native species, but it's a little bit invasive. It's starting to show up more and more every year. The bees really like it. They're getting pollen and I presume a little nectar off of it. But pollen for sure, because I can see it on their legs. And here it's just kind of intertwined with a stand of goldenrod and wing stem. Let's see if I can get a bee with a pollen basket full. Light blonde yellow color. Okay, the last super is going to the cooler. We rent cooler space about 5 miles north of the shop at the Clayton Food Bank. They give us a really good deal. It's hard not to use it. Actually, much safer than using chemicals, honestly, in my opinion. Zero wax, moth, and hive beetle issues. They keep the cooler at about 38 degrees, so it takes really good care of these supers. They've all been robbed out. We set them out over a roof on the other side of the building for a few days and let the bees clean them out. I don't like putting wet supers away for the winter. That's how you get moldy frames and things like that. You need them nice and clean and dry before they go into the cooler for the winter. We used all mediums for our sourwood crop. I like mediums, that's my personal preference. I'm getting too old for lifting deeps, although we still do a lot of it. And then we have, of course, 8-frame spacers in all of our medium supers, which adds a few pounds, makes them more efficient in my opinion. Anyway, last supers. They're still working on feeders. It seems to be an endless project. Guess I had more than I thought, but we're getting them all cleaned up and ready for use next year. And of course we've been putting a feeder in every colony. Looks like a big mess, but it's a work in progress. They're getting it. I think they're on their last pallet of feeders. And again, they'll all be ready for next year. Nuke boxes are all put away for the winter. All cleaned up, ready to use. The wood shop looks a bit like a mess. Got a lot of sugar in here. We'll start using the sugar later. Not quite time yet. Building a lot of lids. Lids for sale, actually. We've got enough lids for ourselves right now, and if we make any more colonies next year, we'll need a few. Looks like he's got 1,000 lids here that are drilled and ready to paint, put together. Endless work down here. Okay, John, I'm going to put you on camera. People want to know how we're loading our smokers, and John does a great job of it, so I'm going to have him just to show us how he loads a smoker. John is good at it. When he's done loading a smoker, it'll last 2 or 3 hours in the field.
Oh God, yeah, that's all day. Yeah.
So we always use the same fuel, and I know there's a lot of fuels that work well. I used to like using hemp string when I could get it, but you don't see it much anymore. We simply use pine straw and hardwood wood stove pellets.
I put a little bit. I didn't put a lot in there to get it started. And I put a little bit more, and it's not very far down in there either. It's kind of more towards the top. Get that going.
We use day damp smokers. We like day damp smokers, and we like to buy the one that has this finger guard right here, because this can get quite hot.
Oh yeah.
And if you don't have that guard on there, and you put your knuckles right there, sometimes you can burn yourself. And these things can actually get red hot in the night if you're loading a semi-truck or loading a load of bees. Those things can actually glow red in the dark, and you can really burn yourself.
Now I put it down in there a little more. And put just like a handful of chips, let those get going good. Put some more.
Sounds like Cheech and Chong, a little bit more, a little bit more.
Right. Gotta get that going really good. Now you can load it. That's good. I mean, that'll last all day, for real.
That will last a long time. And again, these are hardwood wood stove pellets that we buy by the Actually, we buy them by the pallet. I think they're 40-pound bags or something like that.
Yeah.
And we buy them by the pallet.
And then put some pine straw on the top.
Yeah, a pallet will last us usually for all summer.
You got to keep it going when you first get it. It's like, if you let it sit for too long, it'll go out.
Yeah. And then you got to put the pine needles on top also, so when you turn your smoker over, the pellets don't pour out.
Right.
You got to put something on top of the pellets.
And that's going.
That will go for hours because of those wood pellets. All right. Thank you, John.
Yes, sir.
Here's the wood pellets I was mentioning. Nothing fancy, they're just hardwood pellets. You can buy them in most of the hardware stores in this area, Tractor Supply, Home Depot. People around here buy them and use them in their wood stoves in the winter. They're not so available in the summer when they're out of season, but every fall the stores start carrying them again. We bag them up in smaller bags and sell them to people that don't need a 40-pound bag. And then this is I was mentioning the smoker that we like. It's this one right here with the finger guard. It's the biggest smoker. I guess a lot of beekeepers wouldn't need that size. This is the best seller right here. It's shorter and has that grate around it. That grill will keep you from getting burned, and I guess that's why it's so popular. This one right here is the least expensive, and we do sell a lot of them. But once again, that one right there is the one we sell the most of. It's a good smoker. We like the day damp smokers. So in this colony and all the rest we're working on, you can see our strategy for next spring already evolving. And that is that the older frames are in the middle. And those will be the assets for creating nukes in the spring that will be sold. This isn't about selling our old junky black comb because we don't have any. And if you look at this frame or two in the middle, it's just a year, perhaps 2 years older than the frames on the outside. The newest frames go to the outside, the oldest frames go to the inside, so we can pull those for creating nukes in the spring. And again, this isn't about selling old junky black comb, it's about not getting to the point where we have old nasty black comb. If we keep this strategy intact, theoretically, we should never get any really old comb because we're always cycling the older frames out. That one frame, number 4 from the left, is probably a 3-year-old frame, perhaps a 4, I'm not sure. And the one on the outside is brand new this year. This one over here by the feeder is probably brand new this year. So we're selling the comb that's, 2 to 4 years old first. And that's our strategy for always renewing our frames. We don't have to throw out frames in order to keep our frames rotated out. We're just selling them before they get too old. Kind of as a side note, here comes a jet plane. Interesting. It's not a jet plane, it's a 4-engine plane. Every once in a while, planes from Greenville, South Carolina, there's an Air Force base over there. They come flying through the mountains just on, I don't know, just for practice, I guess. Anyway, as a side note, a lot of the colonies we're working on in this yard have a yellow spray paint dot in the lid, which means it's a Pol-line queen, P-O-L-line queen. And we're finding that they're just like the Saskatraz and the Golden West. They're full of brood and not a lot of food. We're having to be very careful as we put these feeders in here, not to take all their food away, what little bit they have. And, most of the food is on the outside, of course, but most of these have had 7 or 8 frames of brood in them, even now. Now, I gotta correct that a little bit. Some of these colonies behind me were actually our queens, our Caucasian type stock, and they still had plenty of food. I showed this in last week's video where we're running across a lot of brood in these Italian style bees. And again, we're working Pol-line right here, so this is what we're seeing in the middle of them is, 6, 7 frames just like that and very little food. Of course, we'll be feeding them, of course, no problem with starving, but it's just interesting to note. And these lids upside down mean they have to be requeened. The one on the left has a poor queen, even though she was mated this year and installed earlier this year. She's doing a poor job, she'll get replaced. The one on the right is doing a great job, but it's a mean colony. So if we run across a mean colony, we will requeen those too. I'm done tolerating mean bees, don't want any part of that. These are what these Pol-line colonies are looking like when we first open them up. Of course, that card is left over from Apigard treatments, which are over now. The bees of these Pol-line queens, the worker bees, are mixed in color. There's a fair amount of yellow, but there's also a little bit of dark going on too. It's pretty obvious that these are mutts, not a pure line of Italian or anything like that. More Italian than anything else, but I do see a few dark bees in there and darker colors in some of the bees that even have a little yellow. So these Pol-line seem to be a mixed line of bees. And I'm not an expert on them, but my understanding is that the Pol-lines were simply chosen for survivability and gentleness, and also early build-up for pollination, mainly for commercial beekeepers, is my understanding what these were developed for. So they can pollinate in California. They're not too mean. They're fairly mite resistant, is what I'm told, and that's why I'm playing with them. I want to check this out. And but boy, they're sure still full of brood, that's for sure. We're switching this pallet out because it's rotten, and it's dark plywood, so this is a chance to really see what this corn pollen looks like. It's very yellow, very fluffy loads. I'm not worried about this particular batch of corn pollen because I believe it's coming from field corn, and although I've seen research and reports that field corn can be an issue, I've never actually experienced that personally. But these bees are bringing a bunch of it in. So, of course, I don't see any at the moment, but trust me, we've been seeing a lot of bees come in with this pollen on their legs. It's just fluffy and yellow. So I've been getting some questions. Why are we putting the feeders in the bottom box when we create a double deep colony? And the answer is that although there's not going to be a lot of feeding done now, there will be later when the weather starts to cool off a bit. And unless a colony is really full of bees, they will do a much better job of accessing the feed if the feeder's in the bottom than if it's in the top. So, and then also in the spring. Well, you're dripping nectar. Did you see that? Yep. Yeah, we got some nectar dripping here. Wonder what it is. I don't know. Anyway, and then in the spring, when it's time to feed during different types of weather, we want the feeder in the bottom so they'll access it better. Now, if it's a two-story colony full of bees, top to bottom, it's a non-issue. Feeder can go in the top or the bottom. But in this case, we just want to make real sure that the bees will have the best chance to access that feeder in cooler weather, and that means putting it in the bottom box. We are leaving the lids cracked in this yard for a reason. This yard just happens to be entirely textbook Caucasian. These are all Caucasian colonies, and anywhere they see daylight, they will plug it with propolis under that lid, and those big fat gaps that we're leaving will be full of propolis in a month, and we're going to collect it. I personally am convinced that propolis is very healthy, especially when you're trying to fight a cold or some flu, something like that in the winter. Very helpful. And half the people that work for me are convinced too. There really is something to it. So what we did is we scraped the lids clean, scraped the rims clean, and when we come back in a month, we'll be able to hopefully harvest gobs of propolis. I'm sure most of these will be filled with propolis.